Good morning, everybody. I'm going to start really fast. There's quite a bit of time pressure on us. We first thank Monsieur Lelouch for joining our session. Hopefully we will convey him our recommendations, and he will convey our recommendations to the other leaders. First, to introduce myself, my name is Ümit Boyner. I'm the chair of Turkish Business and Industry Association, and I'm one of the co-conveners of this working group. The other co-convener is my colleague, Mr. Isuel, who has kindly asked me to moderate this forum in respect for time, but he will make a short comment on how global governance impacts, especially in the age of internet. We need to take one step further, I think, and global governance is a key issue that we're discussing for the first time in this G20, but it's important to get our message across to the decision makers, policy makers. So when you make your comments, please keep in mind that one of the key problems that G20 is facing is a deliverance issue. We do get our messages across, but actually when it comes to implementation, there is quite an expectation in the public for what G20 can deliver, and we know that reciprocity has not always been the case there. The concept of restructuring developing a new structure, a new roadmap for global governance is a very complex and layered issue. Not only because it attempts to change how the world functions, but it also aims to encourage and mandate changes in large international institutions. It requires strong cooperation, dialogue, and political will and decisiveness. We all want a more peaceful and prosperous world. So I don't think anybody would actually refrain from this courageous task. Our working group is actually the culmination of all the other 12 working groups because it cuts across all the issues at hand, and it's vital for all common objectives. To give you an example, the coherence we need for financial regulation, for coherence in coming to an idea of global governance is, I think we can see clearly that we're in dire need of that. And we're not going to reach a level of global regulation to a meaningful level unless we have everyone involved. And unless we fix the issue of the methods of good governance for global issues, then the other working groups will face a constraint on how much they can accomplish, no matter what their proposals are or how diligent they have worked. G20 is the right platform to tackle these issues. So the one topic that we're going to cover today is improving the G20 transparency and consistency of outcomes. We all know that we are at an unbalanced progression in the world. The local issues have global impact and global dimension, but not the right mechanisms to deal with then on the global level. Hence the magnitude and regularity of the crises we live in. The crisis in one part of the world resonates elsewhere. To reap any benefit from globalization, we need to work out the deficiencies in the architecture to offer productivity and welfare. Hence, we need to improve cooperation and collaboration. Cold War institutions from the last century were instrumental in the transition into the 21st century, but now they're outdated and they cannot deal with the new problems of the new century. Actually, the problematic structure that we have today actually exacerbates the situation as being problematic. Hence, we're going to talk about our second topic, improving global cooperation, a multifaceted and multilateral response, and how we can achieve that. As national and international business representatives, we would like to be in the position to provide positive and constructive contribution into the evolution of the framework for global governance. Our topic 3, which is improving the business community's right input into the G20 and the work of international organization, will be another topic that we're going to cover. Here, I would like to stop. My time is up, and I'm going to ask Mr. Israel to make his comments, and then we'll continue with our topics.
Thank you, Mrs. Bonner. By the way, my name is Alierta, because you know in Spain we have 2 names, father's name, mother's name. Okay, well, you know, as Mrs. Bonner said, I'm the chairman and CEO of Telefónica. Telefónica is a company that is in 26 countries, and we have 300 million clients. We have 200 million clients in Latin America and 100 million clients in Europe. And what we see our clients in Latin America and our clients in Europe being persons, enterprises, public administrations, have very similar demand for applications and services in the digital world. And what we see, that each country has a different regulation, different framework. So there is a different framework and governance in each country, when the similarities among the customers are very similar, being from Ecuador or Germany. What it means that we need a global governance. I'm not going to spend much time about the importance of internet, because all you know the importance of internet. But it's very clear to me that global governance needs internet, but internet needs also a global governance. You know, internet has no frontiers. We are in a multipolar world, and let me give you some figures. You know, as of today, in this world of 7 billion people, there is 5.9 billion mobile. That means 85% of the population has a mobile. Of these 5.9 billion, 12% are smartphones, and only 1% of the population has a tablet. The total number of internet users in the world is about 30%. What it means, I mean, we are totally convinced that everybody, every house, every company will have broadband, and every person is going to have a mobile broadband. We have a 70% still of the world population that are going to become internet users. So there is a need to have a global governance for internet before we get to 100%. It's still soon, but the time is going fast. You know, any numbers you make, you know, by 2015, it's supposed to be around 15 billion devices, and by 2020, it's going to be around 50 billion devices. This is machine to machine. So we need a global governance. There it is very clear that the business, we have a much more better information than the national governments, because we are able to see what is going on in the whole world at the same time. And we need a regulation of the internet world as a unique regulation. A regulation which is very, very, very important. There are 2 things very important to have the internet. One thing is to be able to deliver the internet to everybody, which means networks. Networks means a lot of investments. And we have, at this moment, a very asymmetrical situation in which the contribution to make these networks available and the compensation is totally asymmetrical. And it has to change, because otherwise, these 70% people that want to have internet, we won't have it, okay? To give you an example, in Europe, to have the new generation networks, it's estimated that we need to invest around 350 million euros, and in the case of Latin America, around 200 million euros that have to be invested in the next years. And the second thing, which is extremely important in my opinion, is security and privacy, okay? Consumers, enterprises, public administration want the data to be secure and private. And this technically is possible. It's no problem to secure that, but it has to be enforced the world over. That security and privacy is very, very important. And the telco operators, we can guarantee, as we have always done, the privacy and the security of the personal data of the individuals, enterprise, and public administration. But this has to be done soon and very fast, and we see it. And the second thing, which is also very important, like always, you know, this new digital world has changed the rules of the game, and the intellectual property rights now have to be digital property rights that have to be maintained, because there is no innovation, growth, if you develop something and you are you don't have the property of it. Okay, innovation is extremely important, and we have thousands, I would say, millions of young entrepreneurs developing new applications and services that need to be guaranteed that what they produce, it is produced by them. And I have to congratulate the G8 presidency, because the first meeting to talk about these things was this year. And this year, it was during the French presidency. It was the first time that they convened relevant stakeholders in the whole value chain, and this has been the first step. And I want to congratulate the presidency for that, but this has to be moved forward. And I think for that it's very clear that here, the collaboration between the B20 and the G20, it will be extremely important for a much better global governance in the world, especially in this case in the world of internet.
Well, thank you, Mr. Aliarta, and sorry for using Israel before. I didn't know. Obviously, internet and the readily accessible information is quite a dimension on transparency and consistency. With that, I'd like to move to our first topic in our working group's work, which is improving G20 transparency and consistency. And I would like to hear the comments of Mr. Muhtar Kent from Coca-Cola.
Thank you very much. And I want to start by thanking the conveners and members of this working group. I am here really not only representing Coca-Cola, that is one of the largest private employers in the world, 770,000 people employed in more than 200 countries, but also co-chair of the Consumer Goods Forum, together with my other co-chair, Lars Olofsson, who's the CEO of Carrefour. This is a body of 400 companies representing over 2 trillion euros of revenues, consumer companies and retailers in the world across all 5 continents. And we obviously touch billions of consumers every day. So we feel today, from that perspective, that there is a great need for a discussion on more governance, simply because confidence from the perspective of consumers is really at an all-time low. In whatever country you're in, consumers are worried. They're confused about their future, the future of their employment, the future of their economy, the future of their communities. So there's a lack of confidence, there's a lack of collaboration, as I mentioned also at our breakfast, Mr. Minister, and there's a great need for simplification today and some early wins. And governance really cuts across all of these areas, and I think really what we need to do is, our critics are raising their voices, rightly so, opposition to globalization. There's a lot of this things going on against Wall Street, and also the confidence for big business is at an all-time low. We're all guilty by association in the eyes of the public, and I think this is an issue of when we're a brand company, it's the brand of the current world really is it as so. The financial crisis is reinforcing that, and also. I think it's simply naive to think in today's world that any of business or government or civil society can go it alone. I call it the golden triangle. We need more collaboration. The B20 Global Governance Group is contributing to this debate. And I think we all agree in the working group that there's a need for to better map the existing architecture of governing agencies in the world, and determining who's responsible for what. There's a lack of clarity, and also more clarity is needed on the areas not only within the purely global governance, but also on water, on energy, raw materials, commodities. All are linked, I think, very much, and I think without greater global cooperation around reducing trade barriers, as we discussed also this morning, Mr. Minister, that are inhibiting innovation inhibiting investment and job growth, and they're all linked. The lack of results at the latest Doha round, all of these, I think, are very important elements of early potential for early wins. I'd just like to talk about one other thing very briefly. In our industry, there's something called GS1, which is a global food safety initiative. All our companies in the Consumer Goods Forum, 200 on the consumer side, 200 on the retailer side, have worked out this global food safety initiative. And it is actually working also to align worldwide best practices for the safety and traceability of food. But it is also now contributing to the financial industry and standards organization. It is also contributing to the financial regulatory community in a very meaningful way, and it is also contributing to many government institutions such as the European Central Bank, as well as the Financial Stability Board, in what it is doing currently to very successfully as ensuring that food safety standards are applied across the world in a very meaningful way. So there is a lot of linkages where our industry, the consumer goods industry, the retail industry, can also help in this area of improved global governance in the financial sector, which is obviously the bigger discussion of the day today. So with that, I'd like to thank all of you for giving me this opportunity to talk on behalf of the Consumer Goods Forum and talk about such an important topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kent. We have talked about governance and how much collaboration is needed for that. I'm going to now turn over to Ms. Heather Rideout. You're a Mrs. To talk about improving global cooperation because we know no one country can actually solve any problems by itself.
Thank you very much. And may I add my welcome to the Minister. And I want to congratulate you on France on staging a wonderful G20, and the efforts of MEDEF and others should be acknowledged in putting together such an important forum in such trying circumstances. Australia, as our Prime Minister really emphasised yesterday in her comments, and our current Foreign Minister, our former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd and Wayne Swan, Treasurer, are deeply committed to the G20 succeeding. We are located in an area which is really going to see, or is seeing, major shifts in economic power towards that region. And if we don't form bodies and make them work, and allow others to be centrally part of them, they will form their own. And that's very evident from where we sit in the world. So the G20, it was formed in a crisis, and it dealt with the crisis very effectively. But I think in the sense from how we see it, it's at an important turning point, and how we continue to build it will be very important. And essential to that is a commitment, a robust commitment to principles of good governance. And I think that's not an easy task because the G20 hasn't got a legal framework, it's not an institutional framework, it's essentially a networked organisation. And how we take it to that next level is a challenge which we need to meet, and we need to put aside our former allegiances, I think, and throw our weight behind this. Our working group was tasked with looking at these sorts of issues. I think from my point of view, we need to do this for several reasons. If the legitimacy of the G20 is to be strengthened in the eyes of those that aren't members of it, we need to have a look at our governance. If we want an accountable structure, which all business understands, we have to be accountable, we need a good commitment to governance. And if we want to ensure that the G20 actually makes the contribution it should be making to world growth, and business is about growth, and I think we really have to be very mindful that these things rely on good governance. Now, the issues that our working party identified as absolutely fundamental were transparency of process and effective monitoring of process. In terms of transparency, the objective has to be to improve the awareness of what the G20 is doing, how it's progressing, and whether its objectives are being met. pretty straightforward. And this will maintain pressure to deliver and will permit a frank assessment of where the G20 can add value and where it has not been able to do so, because we all live in the real world in business. So I think we have to have a frank and open discussion, and everyone from the outside needs to be able to look in on it. We should have easy access to material. We shouldn't just have communiques up there. We should have supporting material. So the Norwegians and others who've got a very firm view about these issues can also be part of it. And I think issues like a central website, etc., could be very, very important, and links to related documents, etc. We need to be not frightened of monitoring progress and reporting how we're doing, what the issues are. All business plans are dynamic, you know. We all know that they change along the way, and I think the G20, we have a set of commitments, how they're going, how they're progressing, how they need to be modified. I think that should be much more assessed against, and we're seeing that in the financial regulation area, but I think in terms of trade issues, you would understand the commitment to Doha, but the whole issue of protection, etc. I think there's a lot of areas that we can improve there. So the Working Party had a very strong commitment to transparency and monitoring of progress. And, you know, I from a business perspective, I think the most important thing is transparency. Thank you.
I'd like to to carry some of the themes that Mrs. Rideout has touched upon, and to talk on the business community input into the G20. Actually, we do see a progress over time with each G20 summit. The B20 work has become more entrenched, and I think we need to actually strengthen that if being entrepreneurs and being result-driven business people, for whom accountability and implementation are of crucial nature. I believe that our input is very, very important. Also, the issues, all of the issues discussed in G20s have direct impact on business, and we can actually provide the right analysis of these issues and concrete recommendations. Policies and regulations agreed by G20 apply to businesses, almost all of them apply to businesses, and our involvement would be instrumental in ensuring a smooth implementation process. As I think was pointed out earlier, inclusion of all representative business federations to enhance the legitimacy of B20 is very important. Inclusion, transparency, and also, obviously, stakeholder engagement are crucial for these inclusions. Also, the G20 needs to drive the reinforcement of key international institutions that has also been a topic of this program for the last 2 days, because we need to, to increase their impact, obviously, we need to improve their legitimacy. Increasing the weight of the emerging economies in the IMF has been one topic that was talked about. We need to ensure that the international institutions, that their decisions are fully informed by more interaction by all the stakeholders that are affected by their decisions. And we need to increase their effectiveness through extended mandates where necessary. Again, one topic that was discussed in the course of these 2 days was the IMF capacity, the surveillance capacity of IMF. We are living through times where it seems on the governance level, the role of international institutions are going to be increasing and are going to be key to success of implementation for decisions taken by policymakers. With that, I'd like to stop on our presentation of the material that was our agenda, and would like to hear Mr. Minister's comments on what he has heard and on global governance, his vision of global governance. Mr. Minister.
That's a tall order. Well, first of all, thank you for taking the time to hear me. It's a pleasure for me to be with you, and I've had a very, very constructive morning, as a matter of fact. Ever since we started at 7:15 with a breakfast, I had a very interesting morning Must tell you, I was in a roundtable like this on corruption, anti-corruption, which was first rate. And now we are touching on governance. But first of all, Madame Boyner, when I see you and I hear you, I can see why Turkey is so, so effective in the world as an emerging power. You're much more effective than my friend Tayyip Erdogan, I must tell him. And I want to congratulate you, and Sayata, it's a pleasure too to see Spanish, your knowledge and your understanding of the future world. I think you touched, by the way, your remark touched on exactly that. And I want to leave out my prepared remark in French, which I gladly leave with you. I want to touch on a couple of points. I've spent my whole life on international affairs. In various capacity, as an academic, as a lawyer, as a member of parliament, the last 20 years in politics, and minister and so on, going from various subjects, from Afghanistan to Europe, and now trade and foreign policy and defense. I am, and I want to get out of my prepared text, I am extremely worried of the world today, because I can see a lot of extraordinary changes taking place in business. The correlation of forces has changed in a matter of 20 years in a tremendous fashion. The movement of wealth from the former rich in the West to the South and East has been tremendous. The arrival of 2 billion people in the production market is a sea change. The creation of mountain of debts in formerly rich country in order to finance internal stability, and the creation of mountains of credit in part of new producers, China in particular. This has created major imbalances in the system, combined with various other things such as terrorism, the proliferation of mass destruction weapons, religious fundamentalism. If you put all of this in the frying pan, you get in a very, very unstable planet, of which there is no historical precedent. Certainly not since World War II, but probably not since World War I. So all of this is having a political impact throughout our countries, particularly in the formerly rich countries, what I call the former rich. Former rich, particularly the middle classes, are hit directly by this transfer of wealth. The rapidity of change and the connectivity of the people is adding to this. In 5 years' time, at the end of the next presidential election in France, in 5 years' time, China will become #1 economic power in the world. And that tells you a lot of the new correlation of forces in the world. It's going very fast. People are interconnected directly. And the link between politics and economic change is gone. Used to be that we believed, the liberal philosophers since the French Revolution believed that if you had democracy, you could build trade and you could build peace. Today you can have hyper-capitalism and not have democracy. So this is a world in which we are. This world needs governance. If we don't have governance, we will have massive problems, not just for protection of consumers or protection of certain industries, but simply for stability. Now, this is what the G20 is all about. And this is what we, the French, have tried to do for a year, which is to open a whole series of debate. And I thank you, Mr. Ayata, for remembering that we put the first event in which we talked about the internet and IC in the form of cooperative measures. But we also work on many other subjects, commodities, agriculture. When you have derivatives and speculation, what I call casino capitalism, moving into commodities and food, you augment the level of instability in the world in a tremendous fashion, because you multiply the increase of prices in the least developed countries. So yes, the French, because we have this bad habits of wanting to build architectures all the time and think through philosophical problems, we have tried to bring the G20 into a number of new debates, including, for example, nuclear safety, agriculture, commodities, energy, opening the seeds, putting the seeds of future debate. I'm glad to see, for example, that on anti-corruption, the work that has started last year only is already producing quite a bit of new ideas, new avenues for thinking, and I'm pretty sure that we will gradually set the rules. Now, the question is whether this group, which represent 85% of world GDP and about 2/3 of the world population, can actually produce common rules. This is the issue. And I very much hope, if you allow a private view, I very much hope that the havoc of European monetary internal problem will not serve as an excuse for not fixing the agenda of the G20, which is on a whole series of other things, including monetary stabilization, but also economic growth, social elements, the link between trade outcome for Doha and social welfare. So these are on the table. I hope that all of the countries present will find that they are stakeholder of the future system and not just on the receiving end, and that everybody understand that they are part of the solution, be it the environment or trade or monetary issues. We have tried to not just to open a whole series of debate, as I said, but also to be as inclusive as possible in order to reflect the world in its entire diversity. For example, we have opened up to 5 countries in addition to the G20, which have been selected in order to reflect issues. I'm particularly thinking of Ethiopia, Singapore, the United Arab Emirates, Equatorial Guinea, which represent the African Unity Organization, and Spain. These countries were chosen because they reflect the variety of the world. We've tried also to open up to civil society, to world organizations like the IMF. My friend Christine Lagarde was there last night at dinner. The World Bank, OECD, the UN are associated. So this is an all-inclusive, highly reflecting the planet in its diversity, in its complexity. The business community, which is now fully organized as part of the exercise, and I think it's extremely positive. We discussed that this morning. I think the contribution that you can bring is immense in the work of governance. In the nutshell, the problem that we have is that never in history, the changes have been so rapid and so massive. Never in history, the answers must be cooperative and transnational. But yet, the mechanism for the answers remain very much national. The problems require transnational solutions. The answers remain very much national. Why? Because nation states are the basis of the international community, and the people who are making decisions are elected in national constituency. And that's a fact. Now, this is where business comes in, because and I think what you said, sir, is very illustrative. Large multinational corporations, even though they are embedded in one particular country, necessarily have a global view. They understand, perhaps more than government, the need for international regulation and common standards and common solutions. So the input that you can have on public debate is enormous. If you don't do that, the floor will be occupied by nationalistic tendencies in each of the countries. As we move towards more tension and crisis, the beneficiaries will be ultranationalist, xenophobic, and protectionist forces that will grow out of fear. So if we don't want these forces of fear to win the public debate, we need the input of the business community in an intelligent fashion. So yes, I'm a great believer, not just in the G20 in producing gradually rules, but then I'm not naive. I know the pressure, particularly in the emerging countries, and I cannot accuse them for that. I mean, they are starting their development. They are starting, in many ways, their historical revenge. Their time is, they're back, you know, in many ways, history has taken us back to 500 years ago when these countries were ahead before the British Industrial Revolution. China and India were 30% of world trade at that time. So it's only normal that we're sort of going back to normal. But if we want to accompany this and not lose internal stability, we're going to have to, all of us, to be very careful. Understand that we have common interest, and understand that we have to win the political battle in front of our public opinion. Government alone cannot win those battles if they are not helped by other actors coming from private society. And companies provide jobs, provide well-being, are an essential element in this debate. Now, I just want to say a few things in conclusion about the work that has been done by governments, leaving aside the input from the B20 and business community and civil society. David Cameron has been working on a request from Nicolas Sarkozy on a number of ideas of how to strengthen the G20 itself in order to produce rules and governing rules for the international community. Cameron said rightly that we probably don't need new institutions, but yet we do need a better coordination between the work of various international organizations, particularly the kind of stuff we do in the G20 and WTO, how do you call it, le Bureau International du Travail, the labor organization, health organization. All of these have to be working together better. In the case of environment, we in France believe that we do need a new organization, because clearly, maybe because we got cold feet after Copenhagen, to be frank, we believe that we need a forum in which people take commitment and stick to them, and understand that short-term political or economic advantage must give way to superior interest. We absolutely need some kind of a framework here, and we don't have one. But other than that, I think we can do with institutions the way they are and make sure that they're coordinated and make sure that the habit of working together and producing rules will eventually improve the situation. The idea of Prime Minister Cameron is probably to reinforce slightly the secretariat of the G20, make sure we can go back and monitor the progress, and that is needed using the system of a troika, a previous presidency, post-presidency, as we do in EU, and it actually works very well. But again, I want to conclude on the B20, because I have taken myself some involvement throughout the year in various meetings of the B20 in certain subjects, be it trade, financing, energy, anti-corruption today. I think this is a tremendously important instrument, and I really am impressed by the work that you have conducted in the framework of the various working groups. I think the heads of states are now conscious of the fact that they cannot run the world alone, that they have to do it with real economy, and that you are full participant in all of this. So I want to commend the work that you've done. I hope the leaders will come up with the beginning of rules in all of the things that we need, and God knows we need massive overhaul of many of the rule and regulation of which we are doing trade. I am concerned that we do not have a Doha outcome this year, so far. We have a ministerial in December. We will work very hard. We have French work throughout the year to get a deal. It's now hijacked by a number of preoccupations of countries who are not European, but we do not have a deal. I am concerned that we do not have a deal on the international monetary system. We continue to have a competitive devaluation, which again modifies, create unfair attitude on trade, unfair game. We need to have social criteria. We need to have environmental criteria. If we don't do this, our people will be convinced by the fact, and this is very serious, not just in Spain or France or even the US, the fact that trade has been unfair, that people are impoverished, that their children, their fate is endangered by all of this, and so we'll have the same reflex of closure of societies with the same production, and we in Europe know this very well, believe me. We've been through this after 1929, word to word, and I really advise you to read again President Roosevelt's speeches, some of the speeches made by French government under German occupation, okay, on capitalism. They are word to words, the words used today by the forces of fear. Now, I'm sorry if I sounded this morning a little bit grave. Some people will find it alarmist. I'm no alarmist. This is my job. I think I know what my society is, and I'm telling you that we are living momentous moment here. It's a moment of history. For the history of Europe, this monetary crisis is a major moment in the history of Europe, and we better succeed. And this G20 is a moment, a historical moment in the history of post-Cold War, post-World War II world, with a new correlation of forces. So here is a moment to produce those rules together. And I commend you and thank you for the input that the business community, your influence on various parliaments and national debates will do to produce common rules. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Minister, for somewhat, yes, a grim but very realistic outlook. As you said, and maybe as I try to understand, maybe this could be an opportunity to actually cut through the problems and come up with real long-term solutions, with a long-term vision that has been postponed for a long time. And also, thank you for the encouraging view on B20, G20 interaction, for monitoring results, for coherence and continuity. With that, I'm going to open the discussion to the floor. There are a couple of interventions that I know I was made aware of that some of our members will do. We'll start with Mr. Yannick Bolloré, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Minister, for the nice thing you have said about this working group. I must say that I already think that the work you have made is really impressive. I'm here as a representative of Havas Group, which is one of the largest communication group in the world, the fifth one, for us exactly. And I'd like to comment your proposition from maybe a communication point of view. I first share what you said about the top priority to improve the clarity of the G20 actions and objectives. But to achieve this goal, I believe that it is necessary to create a central and independent organization of communication. Transparency, you have said it, is one of the key items of the communication in this century. It is not only in the politics, but even in the business company. Every business CEO knows that transparency has changed the ways that we need to address our different customers. The creation of a G20 web platform is obviously the most efficient medium to reach the largest audience. But I think that official reports, working group recommendations will be displayed and should be displayed like in any international website. I think it also would be a very good way to ensure that decisions taken in G20 are followed by individual governments. Being part of the business community, concrete achievements is true part of our DNA. The measurements of results is something that B20 can impulse to G20. Stakeholders need to see tangible and understandable results in order to join the dynamics. I, of course, also agree that B20 should be established permanently, but I also consider that it should be a full part of the G20 agenda. But my main point is that we should include in this web platform a forum space for the civil society. You said it, the golden triangle between government, business and civil society is for us the best way to meet the new world challenges. The B20 G20 is not, the B20 G20 cooperation is not sufficient as complete sections of civil society are not invited to contribute. I can imagine that if we create something like a CS20, a Civilian Society 20, it could be a part of our recommendations from this working group. Indeed, Arab Spring, or the indignant, reminds us the importance for representatives to be in close relationship with their citizens, and therefore their aspirations to be taken into consideration. I think that what happened to the Greek referendum 2 days ago is a good example of this new need. I believe it is possible to put in place a representative and constructive dialogue framework on the side of the G20. Dialogue, cultural diversity and equilibriums are key factors for peace and stability and therefore for economic growth. I believe this idea is in the company's interests. But I also believe that the 20 heads of states and leaders of international organizations will not make a strong commitment without the support of their stakeholders and citizens. Their involvement will certainly be strengthened by a civil society participation, and it will provide confidence to the heads of state for taking even tough decisions. And I think it will also facilitate the breaking down of some national prerogatives. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your very constructive suggestions. Mr. Ole Johansen, please.
Thank you very much, Madam. First of all, I would like to congratulate the working group for the good work done on this topic. While I'm representing the European Union and Business Europe here in this discussion, I happen to come from a small and economically vital country known for its fiscal discipline, namely Finland. We rank well, as you know, in most of the studies regarding economic competitiveness, environmental performance, social well-being. Coming from Finland, I have noticed that you sometimes find Finns in discussions where independence, objectivity, trust, and efficiency, as well as rule-based and solutions-focused thinking is needed. With this background, I'm convinced that for the economies like ours, a well-functioning, result-oriented system of global governance, probably, as the Minister was saying, better cooperation is vital. We need to produce truly global solutions, and we need to monitor the strict implementation. I cannot disagree with the chair. It's absolutely clear that we seem to have a delivery problem, and I believe that is really where we need to focus. As the Minister was saying, when it comes to winning the battle, the debate with the civil society, it's the delivery that counts. And I'd like to emphasize that part. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please, any suggestions, questions? I have about 5 minutes, please.
Yeah, I want to make a comment. You know, I mean, actually, there is 10% of the world population uses social network, okay, which is nothing. I mean, And the problem with the social networks, people want their data and their privacy to be well kept. There's going to be an explosion of social network, and it has to do with what you said about civil society. I mean, it is clear that internet through social network or whatever is people are making their opinion being made. But I think this global governance about that any person, anything, is data will be well kept. Is and we all know that are peculiar interest in the, behind the social networks. And the good thing is that 90% still don't use social networks.
May I say one more? I was very interested with what Yannick Bolloré said. You know, one of the absolutely new things that's going on in the world today, without precedent, is connectivity. The fact that individual people from one end to the world to the other actually know a lot of things that they didn't know before. I had an opportunity to measure this in what is called the Arab Spring or Arab Revolution this year, because it started, as you know, a year ago, exactly a year ago. And I could measure the impact from one country to the next. And you know, there is a lot of difference between, say, Morocco and Libya and Saudi Arabia and so on. The impact has been all over the place, reaching to non-Arab countries like, of course, Turkey, like Iran. It's been very interesting to watch because, of course, the two things I want to say. First, the engine of that revolution is not anti-American, anti-Western, anti-Israeli. It's only something, a call for dignity and jobs. See, the common point in all of this Arab world is that up to 70% of the population is below the age of 25. And these kids want a job. Now, the second consequence of this is that the kids in Tunisia and the kids in Pakistan actually know what's going on. So when a state like Syria kills its own people, there is no turning back. And every other Arab government knows, even if al-Assad stay in power for a few more months and so on, that there is no turning back and there is no pardon. They know that. So connectivity creates a political situation. And it's part of the picture. Now, moving back to G20, suppose the G20 does not provide answers, and it is watched by civil society and business, the knowledge of that will bring pressure on the government, even though each of the government have their own national agenda. So the one light of hope I see in this very complex world is probably democracy. That is a knowledge shared by millions of people who will demand answers and will not be satisfied by empty sentences or empty commitments. So they will demand things. And that's why, fundamentally, I remain an optimist. I think it's very hard to convince, say, China, India, America, and so on, to agree, say, on Doha or an environment policy, European style. But down the line, the pressure from their own constituency, from their own public, will produce a change of attitude. The same way that there is a change of attitude happening now in the Arab world, because each government knows that they are watched. Each of our governments knows that they're watched. It's a very interesting sea change. And maybe the way out to all of this. So you are right, Mr. Bolloré. There must be ways of organizing knowledge and monitoring of the work of the G20 through the public and business organizations.
Well, thank you, Mr. Minister. We're out of time, and I would like to finish, like you, on a more optimistic note. sometimes adversities actually bear fruits. We know that the business world, the B20, can actually build consensus in a short period of time, in a very smooth and swift way. And maybe it's not very realistic to expect that from politicians by nature, but we know that there are fundamental issues that have remained as issues, even though we've discussed them for many years, because of implementation and reciprocity problems. But we still should not be deterred and keep the communication channels open and varied with policymakers. And I thank all of you, all the working group, and to you, Mr. Minister, for your contribution. Thank you.